Hello, I'm Curt Whitesell, and I want to welcome you to the coolest and most informative podcast in the Westfield, Indiana area. What's Up Westfield? What's Up Westfield is a local chat fest to dig deep into politics, development, who's doing what, and anything else we can fit into 45 minutes of fun online. If you have topics or an interest in being an amazing guest, please reach out to us, and we would love to hear your ideas. My guest today is a Hamilton County native that lives in the big construction world, planning hundreds of millions of dollars in projects, and she wakes up every single day to make sure our Indiana roads work as efficient as possible. Please welcome Jenn Beck to the podcast. Hi, Jenn Beck. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you today?
Good. Is it Jennifer or Jen?
Jen is fine. Jennifer is fine as well. I respond to anything.
Okay. I'm married to a Jen, so that comes out naturally.
Okay. That's fine.
So I'll call you Jen. Well, thank you for doing my podcast today. What's Up Westfield?
Yes.
Jen, I'm going to have you introduce yourself in a second here, but you're with INDOT. And the timeliness of this podcast is you guys are doing a lot of cool stuff in downtown Westfield. And so if we could just talk about that and hear about what you're doing, the plans, and what we can look forward to. But if first you want to tell us who you are personally, professionally, where you're from, that stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from the area. I actually grew up in Carmel on the other side of the 146, as we say. But I just loved Westfield so much. A lot of my friends actually went to Westfield growing up, and I always admired the small town, close-knit feel. When I graduated, it was 1,000 kids in my graduating class, and my friends had like 200 kids in their class up in Westfield. So it was a cool, I don't know, just a better vibe. So after college, I actually married one of those Westfield guys and moved up to Westfield. So we've lived here 10 years now. Got 2 girls, 9-year-old, 6-year-old over at Shamrock Springs.
Okay, cool.
And I love the area. But I work for INDOT. I love transportation. I love construction. You can see behind me, I'm kind of a nerd about it. This is one of our projects over on 37. That's me. I'm from Westfield. I love it here.
Right.
I'm from here.
Where'd you say you went to college?
Purdue. I went to Purdue, and then I did grad school down at IUPUI.
So what's your degree in?
Construction engineering management.
Exactly what you're doing.
Well, kind of, yes.
Sort of.
I'm more on the front end design side management, but I still get to be involved in construction, which is fun.
The familiarity or the schooling probably helps, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what is your official title, and what would you say your typical 8 to 5 is during the week?
So my official title is a senior project manager at the Greenfield District. And a typical 8 to 5 is something different every day. Some days I'm at my computer answering emails all day or doing programming for projects. So project managers at INDOT manage a lot of projects at once. So as much as I wish I was committed to just one, I have about 50 active projects right now. So there's a lot of programming and updates in our systems and, things like that we're working on. But then I'm also out at meetings. I meet with a lot of local communities in Hamilton County. And I should say I specifically manage projects mostly in Hamilton County, a little bit in Tipton and Marion as well, but I'm pretty focused here. So I meet with the cities, with the county, utility companies. So I can be out and about at meetings. I can be out in the field on construction site progress meetings. I can be sitting in front of a computer. It's whatever the day brings.
All over the place. But if we see a state road construction project in Hamilton County, you're probably involved in it, right?
There is a pretty good guarantee I have some involvement, yes.
Do you get to most of those projects weekly or monthly? How does that work out? Because that's a lot of projects.
It is. And not all of those projects are in construction. So we have a 5-year development time to design a project. And we program. INDOT has projects funded through 5 years because of that development time. So I have projects that have just started, that are midway through, that are almost to construction or in closeout. So there's a lot of different phases, but the contracts in construction, I try to get out weekly when we have our progress meetings. But it usually ends up once a month. I can hit every job.
Okay. So how'd you get this job? Is this a work up job? Did you get hired for this job?
I was hired in as a project manager straight out of grad school. So I just fell in love with it and just worked my way up. We have a progression. So there's the associate PM, PM, and senior PM. So I have worked my way up, and I'm 9 years in now, and I'm at the senior PM level.
So when you were in college, was this a job was this a popular job to go get? Work for the state? Was this?
It was no. I interned at contracting companies. So I interned with Walsh Construction. I worked with Pepper Construction a little bit too on vertical building. So it was definitely more geared towards the construction side for what I went to school for. I would say if someone went to school for civil engineering on the design side, they might be a little more shoot into this type of role with the state. So I always planned on going to the contracting side. But I just, when you graduate college, you just kind of throw out your application, your resume everywhere. And I was like, INDOT, that sounds cool. And here we are.
It's worked out, right?
It worked out pretty well. It's pretty fun, that's for sure.
So what was the first big project you worked on? Do you remember?
I would say this one, State Road 37 Fishers. I mean, I know it's in construction now, but that started 2015, and I started at INDOT in 2014. So I have been working on that most of my career. That's the biggest job I have worked on, and to see it almost done is super exciting. And it's had lots of twists and turns, and it's been in the media, but we're almost there.
That's a pretty good first big project to see the whole start and finish of.
It was intense, and I know only being a year in, and the commissioner at the time, Brandy Hendrickson, she's like, I think you're gonna be perfect for this job. And I was like, that sounds scary, but I'm in for it. So
one thing you had mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about the 37 thing. One thing you'd mentioned, there's a 5-year planning for INDOT, but this one is taking like 8 or 9 years. Is it because it's just so big, or how does it go from 5 years to 8 years?
So 5-year development time is for pre-construction. So this one took actually less than 5 years to get to our first bid where we started construction. Wow. And this job was not funded in a normal way. This was more of it was a big partnership with Fishers, the county, Noblesville, and the state. And so it was more of a political conversation and the partnership where everyone was coming to the table. So it didn't get funded in a normal way by any means. But it took about the 5-year time it typically does.
Do most of them take 5 years to plan, do you feel like?
Yes, there can be quicker turnarounds, but the biggest caveat is the funding source. And INDOT wants to leverage as much of our federal dollars as we can. So to do that, we have to plan on using on every project because the federal money it's a match. So the feds usually give you 80% and the state has to pay 20% of the cost. Sometimes it's 90-10. I mean, the split's different for the type of funding, but to leverage our money to match the federal, we try to get federal on everything. And the hoops you jump through for federal money, you can imagine, are extensive.
Yeah, that's probably a lot of work. And so you're the construction or design. Are you dealing with the finding the money stuff? Are you dealing with that side of it?
So internally, yes. Externally, INDOT gets a set amount of money a year based on federal disbursement, calculation. So that's already there. But internally, a project is scoped with our technical services group. And so they keep track of all the data. They keep track of pavement condition, safety data, crash, congestion issues. So the project is born out of one department at INDOT, and that's where you get your initial estimate and your initial scope. Then they hand it over to project management, or we call capital program management. But then it gets handed to us of here's what we came up with. Now you go deliver it. And that's where it takes 5 years from conception, where we already have the funding identified from the start, to letting for construction. If we have funding issues in that time period when it's in our hands, then yes, we have to go figure that out. And it's
are there ever times where the money doesn't work out?
Yes. Actually right now, a brief, if you will allow me to give you a brief explanation of this issue INDOT is facing right now. We have a lot of money being given to us from the feds, and also through, the gas tax went up a few years ago. And so that gave us a lot of state money, which the state money we have a lot more flexibility with. So that was really exciting because we can actually get things done quicker with state funds, and, make more progress and make more direct impact for people. So I know the gas tax isn't always a great thing to hear about, but we can really do a lot more with that money. But the federal disbursements have increased as well. And it's a popular thing to fund infrastructure, which is great. But since COVID hit and we've had all these labor shortages, material issues, I mean, we can't spend the money, and it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge for us. And so much so that right now we're facing, and I've been there 9 years. I know INDOT's had issues in the past, but in my experience, it has not been where we're so over programmed, because we thought we got all this money, everything's going to be great, let's program all these projects, and then boom, COVID hits. We can't finish things, we can't bid things, costs are skyrocketing. So now we have way too many projects than we can afford at the moment.
Interesting.
And we're trying to shuffle things around, and just get things done that we said we're going to do. So it does get very challenging, and sometimes we can't find the money, and if the need's not that important, we have to cancel it or just put it on the back burner until something else happens.
Does the money expire from the federal? Does the federal money expire?
You have to use it every year.
Every year you got to use it up. Okay. Ooh, that's no pressure, right?
No pressure at all.
And there's no guarantee. Let's say you don't use the money. There's no guarantee, or even, is there an assumption that money will be there the next year?
No, and that's the issue. If you don't
change?
use it, then they're going to say, "Hey, you're not using your money. Someone else will use it." So
okay, because someone's going to get it.
Someone will get it, and someone will spend it.
So you say the state money is easier to spend, or it's easier to get. What funds state projects? State money for state projects? Well, you said the gas tax.
Yes.
What else goes into it? Do you know all that?
Well, I don't know the intricacies of it, but I know the state legislature can, allocate, surplus money in the state budget, and there's other sources that they can designate to go towards INDOT. But I believe most of ours comes from the gas tax right now.
Does it? Well, one thing I remember when, so I've been running around State Road 32 for a couple of years now, and I remember years ago it was, where Field Brewing is. I was selling what used to be the little cottage there, and to Field, and everyone would say, "Well, when this is in like 10, 11, when is the state going to widen 32?" And this conversation seemed to be like, well, they're not going to talk and even start talking about that till a certain date. Do you have, and I don't know if that was true or just the gossip of it. Is that how you plan things? Like, you have a date or a year that you're going to start looking at a project already figured out? Or is that just?
Not quite, but I think different people understand what they hear different ways. So if a project is identified, then we might say, hey, it'll be a year until we are ready to start design, because we have to procure a consultant or we have to go through a certain step in the process. But I think what happened really with 32 was the locals, Westfield, came to INDOT and was like, hey, this needs to be up on your priority list. Why is this not on your list? And so they kind of brought it on the radar. I don't, the biggest challenge to explain to locals is why something that is so important for them is not important for us. And you got to put on that state perspective. I mean, you got to look at, like, Westfield's number one problem is not there's
not the state's number one problem.
We have over like 600 local public agencies, be it cities, towns, counties throughout the state. So everyone's number one priority can't be INDOT's number one priority.
Yeah, of course.
So we rank it on, and from this project is a congestion problem. Like, this is a traffic need. So we rank all of our traffic projects, and this one just doesn't fall high on the list if it was purely an INDOT driven project. So.
All right. So let's go back to that. So you got INDOT's running around doing projects. 32's out there on the radar somewhere.
Yeah.
But what really stokes it to get it going? You said that the locals, you mean like the city came to you?
Yes.
Explain how that kind of works.
So the city reached out to the district, commissioner at the time and just said, hey, we have a really big problem here. We need something to happen. We have development that's trying to come. And it's kind of like 37 here. Like it's a need that's not on our radar, but when a local is willing to bring money to the table, you're shifting that cost benefit for INDOT, which bumps it up our priority list. So the fact that Westfield came to us and said, hey, we need this done and we're willing to bring money to the table, not only to get it done sooner, but also so we can do local enhancements. You know, we're going to have a whole streetscape. It's going to look great. And at that time, our leadership said, yep, this sounds great. Let's enter into an agreement and get going.
So does the state dictate how much money a local needs to bring to get it on a priority, or is it just the willingness that makes it kind of a priority?
It's definitely situationally dependent. I mean, it just, in this case, 50-50 was definitely fair. And that's what I've seen our district do in other cases as well.
Have you?
And it's truly just dependent on the project, the scope, the magnitude, the impact to determine what we should carry versus what is fair for the locals to bring.
So does the state see State Road 32 as a problem now?
Yes.
And now that you live so close to, you're in it. I mean, I'm sure you have thought it. Do you see it? You see all these other problems. Is the State Road 32 congestion and traffic a problem, do you think, from a state level?
From a state level, yes. It is on our thoroughfare plan. If anyone is ever really bored and wants to Google INDOT's thoroughfare plan, it's identified as a corridor that has a traffic problem that will need to be looked at in the future. And that's our planning document. That's kind of what we work off of at a very high level to program projects. And State Road 32 has been on there for a while.
And are people or cities or towns or counties always sending you a new street that they want fixed, or a new, I mean, is it constant?
It's constant. Yes. Yes.
I'm sure if there was endless money and time, you would never have enough of it still, right?
Yes, that is true. Yep. If we had all the money and time, we'd do it.
So then you take a lot of money from the federal government, or you get a lot of money from the federal government. Where are those people at? So you're the point person really for the state in like Westfield, for instance. How's the federal government monitoring your progress or your work?
So we have a stewardship and oversight agreement between Federal Highway and INDOT, and every state has a different agreement with their federal office, and it's all dependent on what that agency can provide internally. So INDOT has a very specific one for what we are able to provide. There's smaller states that might not be able to provide the same level of review and expertise to a program that'll have a little more federal involvement, but our agreement actually really delegates a lot of that authority to the state. So while we're getting federal funds, we do have the feds monitoring what we do, and they audit and make sure our program works. But a lot of that authority is for the state to administer.
Have you ever had them have a problem with how you're doing things?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That's not fun, I bet.
No, it's not. They're all, I mean, luckily our federal division office is very, I mean, if there's a problem identified, there's always, well, let's fix it and let's find a path to fix it, instead of it being treated as, well, you're going to get punished and we're going to take your money away and we're going to do that. They always are willing to help us find a solution when we run into a problem.
So is there a Jenn Beck of the federal government here locally that is someone you speak with, or is it not that close?
Well, kind of, yes. There is one person that's my go-to at Federal Highway, which they all, INDOT has 6 different districts. So Federal Highway also has different people assigned to different districts. So I do have a contact for my project development at Federal Highway, and we know each other very well.
I bet.
Yes.
They do the cities like the way this process works typically, because it's all really important to them. They have a pain point probably, or they think they have a want. Do they have a hard time understanding your perspective and then how you're trying to fund it from the federal? Is the trickle down a messy little phase there?
It's very complicated. And I do find though that when we explain to a local entity, it's usually an elected official, the process of how, INDOT has a certain amount of money and we compete with ourselves to get our own money. So the way we fund our projects is also through a competitive, each district puts in their needs, and it's all ranked on this statewide level to make sure the highest needs are getting funded statewide and not unfairly balanced. So we explain that to locals, that it's not that we just pick random projects and do them. Like the need has to be there, the cost effectiveness has to be there, and it has to score and go through an entire process before we can even start.
So what is the timeline? I mean, is that a year? Is that months? Is that years that it gets talked about before it even qualifies?
Oh yeah, years. I would say some things come up quickly. But it takes a year from when our technical staff identifies a project, pulls together a scope, and then they have to go to central office and go through the process of getting an award. That takes a year. So it's a year from conception to funding, and then it's 5 years till construction.
And so, and when it relates to 32 here, where in that 6-year range do you feel like we are, or are we?
So right now we are at year 5.5. I mean, we're knocking on the door of construction. So we have gone through a lot of work behind the scenes to get to the point we're at today. That's for sure.
So and so some of the physical things that we see, like property acquisition, and there's a dirty term that goes along with that. But what is your eminent domain? What is your process of doing that? Just kind of the cut and dry of how do you buy property from private property owners?
So we get our plans done first. We got to make sure we know what our impacts are, so that we're buying an appropriate amount of right of way. Got to be able to justify it, obviously. And then we get an appraisal. We hire, certified appraisers. We also have review appraisers. And then INDOT has our own staff that reviews an appraiser. So when we come up with a number for a property that we're buying, whether it's a partial or total take, it is a fair market value that's been reviewed multiple times, because we truly want to pay fair market value. There's the rumors of the states trying to take advantage of people and just get things cheap is completely untrue.
Stealing all the properties.
It is not true, and it is completely fair to disagree with an appraisal. I mean, that's anyone in your business, like it's totally fine. And we're trying to get that fair market value. So when property owners say, "Hey, we don't agree," that it's not offensive. Like, please show us, comps that you have, or give us something that we can help to justify what that fair market value is. So we do all that legwork before we even present an offer to make sure that, we're giving the best offer, we're getting the right value, and presenting a property owner with something that hopefully, meets their expectation. But when even if it's a partial take, it's still a very sensitive process, because it is a bad word. It is an aggressive approach to have to do something like that. So we want to be sensitive, and we always, especially with this project, we've had 13 total acquisitions that have had relocations involved. It's definitely very sensitive. Yeah. So we want to be as amicable and work through the process as smooth as we can, especially for the relocations.
I was surprised, and you didn't go through me to buy anything, but I was surprised how fair the offers were up front. I know some people weren't happy with them, and there was some negotiation, but I was really surprised. Like, I've never been so close to the offers and heard what the offers were, and you hear these awful nightmares of the government's coming to take my property, and they lowball, but it was actually fair pricing, and at times I think it was actually, don't tell my clients this, but at times it was high. It was it blew my mind what you offered people on the first run, but I get it. You have to follow what the fair market value is, and so then all right. So you offer them. What is the timeline that it usually takes? So Curt Whitesell gets offered for his quarter of an acre, whatever that number is. I don't like it. What goes from there? Or I'm not just accepting it. What happens next?
So from the time an offer is submitted, we have to wait 30 days before you're allowed to file for condemnation. And I say that because while we're never wanting to rush to that end result, we also have to be sensitive of our timelines and the funding that our budget is tied to, and making sure that we're staying on a schedule. So there's the 30-day time period. You get an offer, you don't like it, we negotiate, we go through documentation. If we can't get there by that 30-day mark, depending on the project schedule, which this one was aggressive, but if we had more time and we thought we were going to get somewhere, then we would keep going. But if we knew that, okay, we are just not coming to terms, let's let the court decide. Let's just go through that process. Then there's no debate, right? It's the court will rule their ruling and go through there. So there's that 30-day time period. And then from that point, if we file, we plan for 6 months to go through that process.
Okay. And does it typically take 6 months? Is that usually what it takes?
It's typically 3 to 4 months. But sometimes, there's ways it can get drug out a little bit sometimes. So that's why we plan for 6 months, just in case there's issues with the process or something comes up that we're not expecting.
Who usually wins when it goes to the courts?
There's
always a winner and a loser. I mean, do you feel like the property owners get more money usually when it goes to the courts, or do they not usually get more money when it goes to the courts? Or do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I will give a disclaimer that it's an opinion, because I don't know the agreements that they have with their attorneys, right? So I don't know what they're having to pay to hire the attorney. But sometimes I feel that more money is received, but is it really more money in their pocket?
Or it's going to the
or did it just fund the attorney and they got paid? That's
it a wash in the end. Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's a gamble, and a lot of it's just dependent, because it is, again, it's all based on fair market value. And to your point, I appreciate that you saw some of these numbers and felt that they were fair, because that's the goal. But sometimes maybe we hired appraisers that undershot the mark, and that is what it is. And then the court process comes back and ends up giving people a little more than what we had, and that's fine. And again, the goal is just to get that fair number. But sometimes they come back higher, sometimes they come back lower. And then so you're rolling the dice at that part. And I would say in Hamilton County, in my experience, it has been a roll of the dice both ways, and never significant in any way. So it's there's always outliers, but I've never seen everyone's getting a ton more money now that they went to court. We don't see that.
Yeah. My lighting's driving me crazy.
You're fine.
I don't know if this will help. That doesn't help. Sorry. Okay. And we will not edit this out, by the way.
Okay, perfect. Good. Everyone can know that you need to have the right lighting.
I don't know. It's just there's a window right here. All right. So we agree. We go to the courts. You've decided a number. It's over. Then they get paid. Usually they get paid within like 30 days or something, 60 days, 90 days, 100 days. What is that? Or do you know?
Well, if it's through the court, we deposit money as soon as the court-appointed appraisers come back with a number. So they give us whatever the number is that they say. We deposit it within a week. And then it can be, the other party is entitled to withdraw that money, either right away, or sometimes you can file, or if you still don't agree with it, then you go to a jury trial, and you have a more drawn out process. I have not been through one yet.
Okay.
I have a feeling I might go through some here soon, so we'll see what that's like. But
you just jinxed yourself.
I know. But then that's where, then it's really, then you're the ultimate number that the property owner ends up getting is in the hands of jurors. Right now, it's just who knows what could happen through that process. But even if you go through that, you're still entitled to withdraw the money that we've deposited, knowing that it could change, because the jury could come back lower. Yeah. Right. So you don't know. So then in that case, I haven't been through that, but that's in theory something that could happen.
That would be awful to go spend that money and then they say it's less. Seems like a weird, like, cart before the horse. All right. So then possession. So you got these people paid, you're taking their property, or you've bought their property.
We're purchasing.
And then I really don't think this is a bad process. So when I say that, it
Yeah.
just, I think it actually went
We
really
are
good.
trained not to use the word take. It is
Yeah.
aggressive, intimidating. So we are very sensitive to how we word the
It
process.
is. That was a bad way to describe it. I apologize.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
you've made a deal with someone to purchase their property at fair market value, and you've closed or they've gotten their money. How long do they usually have to get out of that property?
So technically, there is no promise of additional time.
Oh, from when they get paid.
That's technically.
Okay.
We prefer to offer 90 days. If it's, again, depending on the timeline, depending on the issues going on, sometimes we condense it down to 30 days. But we are always, and that's the formality, right? Is usually the 90-day notice to vacate, or 30-day notice if it's just property that you're moving and you're not a residential tenant or whatever's going on. But we will always be as flexible as we can be on that date. So while we give
Yeah.
those official timeframes, we, depending on the project schedule, we will grant extension after extension as long as it doesn't impact the project.
Mm-hmm. So like in Westfield on State Road 32, one sign goes up and then another that it's the state property or whatever, and then they vacated by then. And then it stalls.
Yes.
Because you're at different stages of possession or pay or whatever transactions.
Yep.
How long has that been going on, or do you guess that takes from the first one you got possession of and they've moved out till when I think you probably feel like you're about to wrap up on everything? How long has that period been?
So when we're about to wrap up with right-of-way acquisition,
Yeah.
it should be, I'd say, 5 months all in, 5 to 6 months all in. And we don't like them to sit by any means. But obviously we want them all to be demoed in one contract together so that it's more expensive if you have someone come and get one and then they come back and get one. Now we're paying a lot of mobilization fees. But it also takes a long time to get the utilities disconnected. And especially here where we have, I've also worked on US 31, and a lot of those properties only had electricity because they had, a well for their water and they had septic systems and all that. But here, where you're tied into all these city utilities and there's a lot more connections, it takes time to get those disconnects. We have to do asbestos inspections, and then we have to inspect to make sure we don't have endangered species that have decided to take residence in the houses.
That
so
happens?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. What's an endangered species that is in the house?
Well, bats. Bats will go up.
Bats,
if there's ever openings into the attic or anything in the house. We got to make sure no bats have camped out. And there's also sparrows. We're not allowed to disturb sparrow nests. So if one has made a nest, then we have to wait until the babies have flown away.
They move on. Okay, yes. So you've got no endangered species. I'm always boggled by the bat thing in the fall to spring or whatever. But you've got the sparrows gone, and then now let's say you've got all the properties on 32 and the signs on them, and you own them. Everybody's paid. Everybody's gone. Then what do you see next?
Then you see contractors coming through to take them down one at a time.
So will they take all the buildings down before they start with the disconnects and the utility?
No. Utilities. Yeah, sorry. I was lumping in utility disconnect with that process. So the utilities will all get disconnected first. All those inspections will have taken place, and then we'll get the green light for demo, and then the contractor will come out and take them out.
And literally, I mean, they just scrape them all right at once. It's pretty
dramatic. Usually an excavator, and they just smash them all together and throw in a dumpster and haul them away. I wish it was a little more sensitive. I don't know. It's very aggressive.
Well, they got to go.
I mean, I don't know like what else I expected when they do it, but it is a sight to see. I know they just took some down. The developer took some, the Wolfies and that small blue building as well. So those ones already came down, but.
So then they show up, and I hope you don't mind me going through all this because I think people we don't know how it works. And so they show up, they tear everything down, and then once they have it all torn down, what happens next?
If there are basements, then you have to take out the walls of the basement, and then we got to backfill up to grade. Because where a lot of these buildings are is where there's going to be a road, so we want to make sure there's really good material there to build a road on top of. And then once they do that, since there's going to be time between the building demos and road construction, they will have to seed the dirt, and so make it for erosion control, that there's not just a bunch of exposed dirt getting rained on and draining everywhere. So you'll see that happen. And then that's kind of the end of demo, is seeing some green grass grow, and then utility relocations start from there.
So you really are, when you tear the houses down, you're prepping that ground for the reconstruction of it.
Yep.
And so that what we see there is like the bottom, or the start to when they start building it down the road, when you see that grass.
Yeah. And they'll end up tearing that out, but because of the time in between, you have to have something there. So
how much time is in between? Buildings are all gone, scraped, grass is growing. Are they mowing it for 4 years, or is it like, we talking months?
I hope not. Oh gosh. Well, the gap between that and the road work is going to be utilities.
Okay. So whatever it takes to move that stuff.
And that's a lot of time.
What utility, and there's some exciting stuff about the utilities. What utilities are getting relocated? What does that mean?
So all of the utilities that are on the south side of 32, since we're widening to the south, all have to move out. So above ground and below ground are all going to scoot a little further south to be outside of that future road footprint. And Westfield has paid Duke to go underground with the relocation to enhance the beautification of the downtown.
Very cool.
So that's going to be exciting, because there are a lot of ugly power lines and comms lines up through downtown Westfield. So we do also have a joint bore plan. So what's really helpful is all these comms. You got Comcast, Zayo, AT&T, MetroNet, all the there's a bunch of different companies on these lines, and they have all agreed to work together in a joint bore, which is very helpful, because sometimes if they don't want to do that, you have one person going in, and then the next person comes in, and then the next one comes in, and they hit the other one, and then the other one has to come back out, and it's a whole ordeal. So when we can get them to work together, it helps everybody out. So it'll be a joint bore. They all go in together in a duct bank, and then they each have their own conduit lines that they run in. So that'll be helpful and convenient to help streamline that process.
So what are you doing during that time when they're you personally? What are you personally?
Me personally. When the utilities are going, we are just having progress meetings to make sure they're staying on schedule. So utilities have a lot of protections of their process, because they're just like us. It's a public infrastructure need. They're serving the same people that we are with their services. So they have an appropriate amount of time to develop their relocation plans. And when they do the relocation, they tell us exactly how long it's going to take, and where they're going to be, and how it's going to work. So my role during that period is to make sure that that's happening, and keep them on their schedule that they gave us. And if something comes up, then we try to help work through it to keep them on their schedule.
Okay. So you're in and out of there. You're still present. Yes. You don't disappear while they do that construction. Okay, so now all the utilities are moved, and this is the exciting part. Then what happens? What happens?
Once the utilities are gone, we can actually build the road. Yay!
And that is a years-long process, isn't it? The construction alone.
Yes, and unfortunately, because of our issues right now, where we just have so much work coming out, and we have so much restriction on labor availability and competition, we are finding that we have to give more time to contractors than usual to ensure that we can, again, get competitive bids. Even just to get bids, because right now we're getting contractors who are refusing to bid if we don't give a generous amount of time for the work to be done.
Oh, really? Okay.
And this has been recent, just the past few months, where they're finally like, we're not even going to bid on this work because we can't do it in a year, and you have to grant more time. So this was definitely a one construction season job initially, but depending on where the utility relocation timeline ends up falling, I've already we've talked internally that this is definitely going to go into 2025 to ensure that we can get a good bid and a good contractor out there to get the work done. So yeah, we're looking at potentially more than a 1 season job.
Yeah. It's just the reality of things these days, isn't
Yeah.
it? Hmm.
Yep.
How do you think how do you think that'll affect downtown? I mean, I know it's gonna be ugly, but
Yes.
and I know you don't want it to but take a long time, but what do
No.
you think happens to a downtown? You've seen it all over um, during that construction time. What are some of the effects?
The effects is that it just people avoid the area. I mean,
Hmm.
we encourage, detours. We want people to stay out of the work zone,
Hmm.
um, and make it a safe place. But I know for the businesses, it's a huge impact to be able to, I mean, they want people there. And like Westfield
Hmm.
just built a, $30 million park there. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
trying to draw people there, and then we're
Uh-huh.
about to show up, and even there is a short-term closure involved in the project, but most of it will still be open to traffic. But still, it'll be a work zone. It'll be hectic.
Hmm.
People aren't going to want to drive there. So, and that's the biggest issue that we have, is just being able to maintain functionality of a downtown
Hmm.
while still getting the road work done.
And I'm
But
sure you have to weigh like complete closures to speed up the process versus keeping it open so people can still function.
Well, and one thing I don't think a lot of people understand is that to keep traffic open when you're building a road, it costs a lot of money to build this temporary pavement. And even though it's temporary
Oh yeah.
pavement, 32 is on a truck route. So you're building a pretty substantial, you're essentially
Hmm.
building a road that you're going to tear out just to maintain traffic. So
Hmm.
I mean, but we understand there's a benefit to that because of the user
Yeah.
cost of someone who now has to drive out of their way, and they're spending gas money, and
Hmm.
it's so we get that, which is why we do try to maintain traffic as much as possible. But sometimes, especially when you're in a tight downtown, there's only so much you can do. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just restricted with your space.
Do
So we
people
think
change do people change their habits back pretty quickly though? Have you found that? Once
yes,
they obviously like me, I'm going to avoid 32 as my cut through, right?
yep,
But as soon as it's open to does everybody come back pretty
yes.
typically?
Yes,
Like that,
yes, they come back.
yeah.
The
That
traffic
car
counts prove that too. Yes.
they come right, yeah, and that's like with 31, I remember that was probably my first experience down in Carmel, like around 100 or Main Street. And I remember that some of those restaurants just had a really hard time going through that.
Yeah.
But it seems like it turned out to be like the greatest location if you get through it.
Yes.
You got to
Yes.
get through that window. So what are things and resources and communication that I know people bug it at some point it's just high maintenance, but that local businesses and people can have with stay and maybe you so that they can stay updated on things. What are good ways of communication?
So I would first encourage everyone to follow INDOT on social media. We have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those fun things. But make sure you follow the district as well. So there's INDOT, and then there's INDOT Greenfield District. INDOT's going to give you a lot of generic information statewide, whereas the district is going to show you projects in your area. And to
Hmm.
be fair, our district is wide, so it's still, I wish more people followed the state's sites, but I understand there's a lot more information than they probably care to see. So then they're like,
Yeah,
I don't care about this. Why am I following this?
yeah.
Um, but to account for that, we already have been working with the Westfield city staff and their communications team to work on a very robust plan. So we're
Cool.
going to have a project specific website,
Hmm.
32connects.com. I think it's already out there. That got leaked earlier per se. But you can go out and put in your email information on the website, and then you'll be on our distribution list. So then you'll get
That's
emails every
cool.
time we have updated info on the traffic and timing
That's a
for
great idea.
shifts. So that will be there, but it will also be a site that has information specifically for businesses. So we're
Hmm.
going to show, hey, here's the updated information on a closure, and here's where parking is available. Here's where you can tell your not tenants, but your people who come to your business, your patrons, how to
Hmm.
get there. And we're willing to produce exhibits for specific businesses.
Cool.
I mean, we're going to go above and beyond on this because we recognize the impact it has, and
Hmm.
are going to make sure we provide those resources. And I'm sure you know Steve Latour.
Yeah.
He's been involved in our communications plan process
Hmm.
and has been a huge proponent of how we're going to get that information to businesses. So I think there's a monthly meeting he hosts for the Westfield Business Association. We're going to start going to those. John Nail and I are going to go and present updates. And I'm even trying to get them to use Westfield Welcome to get some events that are specifically like construction themed. And I'm like, I might be the only person that is excited about that or wants to go to that. But I think that would be really fun to just have events and use that park that it's close enough that people will still be able to get to those businesses, even though there's construction going on, but to still draw people and, keep the businesses content. Because once it's done, like you said, it'll be worth it. But we just got to keep them hanging in there.
Do you feel like you've been talking about this project forever?
Yes.
Like, do you get that one? And not just this project. Do you feel like you just talk about these projects forever and ever and ever?
Well, it takes so long to design it, and it's frustrating because so State Road 32 just east of here, right, all the way to Noblesville. INDOT is going to be widening and adding a through lane all the way to Noblesville, and so we have a public involvement plan, and we had our first public meeting last year where we just presented the purpose and need of the project. So I don't even have plans for that. I just wanted to tell everyone, hey, we are kicking off our design. Tell us what's important. And everyone's like, well, when's it going to be built? I'm like, well, it's not until like 2025. I'm like, it's a really far. They're like, well, this is too early. I'm like, I know, but I want your input now because it takes me 5 years to get it ready.
And I don't think people, and I don't know if it's from experiences, but I think because a lot of I remember when that meeting came out, I don't think a lot of people realize that you do want to have their input.
I really
may not get to design where all the curb cuts are, right? But you want their input.
Yes.
And
we need to know what's important to people. And it does. And I know people feel like, well, you're not listening because you don't do what I say. Well, just because we're listening, we can't always do what everybody wants. We have to weigh everybody's interest and find the sweet spot. But if you're not representing your interest, then how are we going to know? Like, how are we going to be able to factor it in? And even if you don't get your best outcome, we are at least going to give you an answer and explain why a decision was made and how we would suggest to mitigate it. I mean, we're still going to respond and give, come full circle with it, but we can't all get everything we ask for, right? I tell my kids that every day.
I don't give them anything they ask for. So is it fun to see a project finally done? Do you enjoy this enough to where it's neat?
It is. I mean, these are my backgrounds. Yes. So they're very exciting. And it just so much goes into it that when you find, I mean, I'm just now 9 years in, like actually seeing these big projects come to fruition. It's like, oh my gosh, from start to finish, I'm finally getting that point where I get to see it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. It is funny. You mentioned your backgrounds. I always tell everybody to watch your backgrounds, and like mine's this chaos. But I mean, at least it's not inappropriate. And that's what happens. So that is a great background. All right. So tell us something that you find really, really hard about your job. What's difficult about just like in what's been a hard part of the Westfield 32 project?
The hardest part, well, I would say there's two things. What I find the hardest is the relocation part. And working with property owners and businesses who are, it's unfair. I mean, they're minding their business, operating, just living life. And then here comes INDOT like, oh, you got to move. Sorry. I'm like, if someone knocked on my door today and said, you got 30 days, get out, which that's not how it happens, but it's still like,
that's the perception.
Gosh, like I have to change I have to move now. I have to, I mean, it's a big impact on someone's business or their residents. And that's hard to work through. And it's stressful and we try to go above and beyond and make sure people find a new place and it works out well. But then the other challenge is just explaining what I talked about before, where we have to balance competing interests. And it's a downtown project. It's a huge impact, and we recognize that entirely. But there are a lot of stakeholders on different sides of the fence. Like, right, there's historic groups, right, preservation groups, and this historic society, and people very interested in preserving Westfield's history. And we are too, by all means. I mean, we are interested in that. But then you also have, you got the city department, you got like the developments coming through that are investing money in the downtown. You have property owners who have different interests. You have the parks department with their long-term plans for the downtown. I mean, there's just so much different competing interests that having to explain, like, again, no one's going to get everything they want.
Yeah. But balancing that's tough, isn't it?
Yes. And communicating it, because to your point, not everybody understands the intricacies behind the funding and the strings attached and the hoops we have to jump through. Oops, sorry. And so that makes it it just makes it difficult. And then it's just a tough process to work through when they don't understand why. You're trying to explain to them why. I don't know. You want to feel. I'm one of those people who is very committed to. I want everything to be a win-win. Like I'm, so committed to the cause, and it's tough when there's people who just they don't think they're getting a win, and they are, and you're dealing with that. That's a challenge.
So okay. So what's something really cool about your job that you love about the process of all this? What is a really cool part of it?
I love the outcome. I absolutely love the outcome of getting a project and improving people's lives. I mean, that's why I do this job, is because I want to, like, a lot of kids in college probably had the, like, what do I want to do in life, epiphany moment. And I changed my major like 5 times, right? Like I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew like the core of it was I want to help people. And there was a time where I wanted to go into healthcare, but that's too gross. So I couldn't do that.
It is gross.
But I wanted to help people. So this is where I get to help people. Everybody is impacted by the roads and transportation. Even if you're a hermit and you never leave your house, that means you use Amazon, and they need the roads to be able to deliver your stuff. So to be able to impact people's lives and commutes, road rage. I mean, imagine like people who come home every day so frustrated from a commute. You fix that problem, you have changed that person's life. I mean, that's pretty exciting. And when you get the comments back at the end of it, you're like,
so it's not just all complaints.
It's not. It is a lot of complaints, but we get people who are thankful and we're like, thank you. Like that's what we do it for, is to have that benefit at the end of the day. But it is a painful process.
How do you control yourself? I'm pretty immature, but how do you control yourself with social media and just the constant barrage of bad information? Do you just ignore it now? I mean, because there's a lot of it.
Everybody tells me not to read it, but I can't help it. I read it. I read every comment. If anybody watches this and wonders, I've read what you say about INDOTs, and
and it hurts.
It hurts, but I also understand when it comes from a place of frustration. Like, so you kind of gotta mature and realize where people are coming from with their anger, to not let it be so upsetting. But sometimes people go personal, man. People go deep, and I'm like, this is intense. Like, why?
And I get it. I get it because it's very emotional to them. But I also think, and you do a good job of this. I think there is a responsibility, and you guys have already been proactive on this. There's a responsibility for communication to be good and the information to be shared. And I like that you keep sharing the current information when you respond. And a lot of times it just gets ignored. And I don't think that's the way to, you take a bad comment, right? And you say, well, here's an opportunity to share the real information, and you're not bantering, instead of just ignoring it. Because I think there is a lot of good information out there, and it just needs to be continually shared. And ignoring the problem doesn't go away.
I would love for an answer to the communication problem overall, because I feel like now there's just so many different ways people get information. Like, I can have this website, but if there's an elderly couple who doesn't have a computer, they don't know what I'm putting out there. I put things in the newspaper. Who even reads that? Like, I don't know what that is. Yeah. So you try to put information everywhere you can, but there's still always people you're not going to reach. I mean, it's tough. But yeah, I do. It takes a lot of restraint sometimes, but I do always want to try to provide accurate information and take out the emotion of it. And so you'll see my personal Facebook, I'll comment on stuff just to try to say, like, here's where the website is, here's where you can find that information, or here is what you need to know, and then that's it. I don't
That's good. So are you doing that on TikTok too?
I don't have a TikTok. I don't even, my daughter, my
All
9-year-old's asking me for TikTok. I'm like,
right.
I'm not into that.
So much fun. All right. Well, I appreciate you doing my podcast. I know this is you probably feel like you repeat yourself a lot, but it's good, great information. It's fascinating to me,
Yes.
especially since we've been talking about this for so long. And to
Yes.
watch movement, even though it doesn't seem like a lot probably to you, but
Yes.
movement and activity, we're excited. So tell real quick, where can we find you? I know you kind of covered some of it, but how do we get a hold of stuff? How do we reach out to you if you want that stuff like that?
So 32connects.com. Everybody needs to go sign up for those updates. That's when the website goes live here in a few weeks. That's going to be where all of your information is, and everything that you see on any social media or anything is all going to link back to that. That's going to be the home base for everything.
Cool.
If anyone ever wants to get a hold of me directly at INDOT or INDOT in general, you can always contact me at jbeck@indot.in.gov, or we do encourage customer feedback to go through INDOT for you, so indot4u.com. That is our customer service team is really great at getting the question to the right person. And they also are really good at bugging us to make sure we respond quickly. So that's the best way to get timely information on something. But also you can email me directly, and I'm always happy to help answer questions.
Can they text you?
You can actually. My work number is my personal cell phone number, which my background is even a road.
Awesome.
You could see that for a second there. That's okay. But it's but yes, I will text.
All right. There's only 12 people that listen to this, so you're fine.
All 12 of you text me.
Yeah, and it's all my family, and they live out of state, so it's no big deal. Well, thank you very much. It's super exciting. I know it's been a long road, and there's ugly times, and there's a lot of there's just a lot of headaches with it. But we appreciate all that you're doing, and I think in the end, it's going to be an awesome project. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was fun. I appreciate it.
All right.